First, there was the 1989 political thriller novel House of Cards by Michael Dobbs. Then, there was House of Cards, the 1990 British television adaptation of the novel, created by Andrew Davies. But when House of Cards, the American television series, created and originally showrun by Beau Willimon, debuted in February of 2013, it wasn't only those two important pieces that fed into its development. In fact, the creation of the American House of Cards was one of the most unique examples of developed programming in the history of TV at that point, and its creation, release, and subsequent success would ultimately help to change the industry forever after. In some ways, the show's creation wasn't that notably different than many others. In 2008, the critically acclaimed filmmaker David Fincher was shown the British series by his agent, and, eager to explore the possibilities of long-form serialized TV storytelling, he decided he wanted to make his own new adaptation of the material. Fincher paired with independent studio Media Rights Capital, or MRC, who had purchased the rights to the property, and then hired Willimon, a playwright and, importantly, a former aide to Chuck Schumer, Howard Dean, and Hillary Clinton, to write the series. The team at MRC then shopped around the project to potential cable networks, like HBO, Showtime, and AMC. But this is where things get interesting and revolutionary. Because another contender they brought the project to was the online DVD rental turned streaming video service Netflix, who was eager to continue producing original television series after first experimenting with the concept with 2012's crime dramedy series Lilyhammer, a co-production with Norwegian TV. Netflix was intrigued by MRC's pitch, but wanted to first make sure the project made sense for their service. So, they turned to algorithmic data culled from the viewing habits of their 33 million subscribers, analyzing the data and discovering significant overlap between fans of the original British House of Cards, the films of David Fincher, and the films of leading man Kevin Spacey, who is now attached to star in the series. On top of that, the same data also showed that fans of political TV shows tended to binge-watch them, which made the show an excellent fit for Netflix's drop the entire season at once business model. Netflix Chief Content Officer Ted Sarandos, looking over the numbers, admitted the project was, quote, the perfect storm of material and talent, end quote. And so, Netflix famously committed to a $100 million two-season production order before a pilot episode had even been shot, an at the time unheard of move in the TV industry. The gamble would pay off for Netflix, as the show would go on to be a huge hit with critics, audiences, and award-voting bodies. And while a series of sexual assault accusations against Spacey in 2017 would cause Netflix to part ways with the actor and produce the sixth and final season without him, the show's overall legacy and importance to the streaming service's subsequent domination of TV is undeniable. But also worth noting is the effect it had on David Fincher's career, as the filmmaker was obviously pleased enough with the success of both House of Cards and his second Netflix series, Manhunter, that in 2020, he signed an exclusive deal for both TV and film with the streamer, a deal he extended in 2024. And perhaps it makes sense that he felt he found a stable home with Netflix, as the premiere of the successful House of Cards did come just 1 year after the release of an attempted Hollywood cinematic franchise starter that, despite arguable financial success, failed to materialize his hoped-for sequels. The year is 2011, and Sony Pictures are ready to release a big-budget adaptation of a recently successful literary phenomenon, and in the process hopefully launch the next big mystery thriller franchise with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. And as the world is consumed with discussing Nazis, rich elites buying media companies, sexual assault of young women, and cover-ups of pedophilia, we decided to have a change of pace and discuss The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
That's right. Well, I thought your intro was going to be about how you, as a Canadian, also come from a land of ice and snow. But then again, I can't. I mean, I'm freezing in my ass off in Michigan right now, so I can't even.
It's actually kind of warm here, so yeah.
Oh, you son of a bitch! You son of a bitch! Oh, the tables have turned. The tables have
Yes.
turned.
Yes. All those Canadian jokes are catching up to you.
Coming back to bite me in the ass. Yeah. Well, look, we'll get to that. We'll get to our new movie and our new theme in a moment. But Chris, if you would allow me, I just want to take a brief moment. I won't spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to throw out a brief plug for a new enterprise of mine.
Star Trek Enterprise. Interesting. Oh my God.
Oh my God, I wish. Oh my God, wouldn't it be amazing if I could be on the Star Trek Enterprise? Let's just talk about that for a bit. Let me get my fan fiction. No, I have started a new podcast. So not to supersede this one or anything, but if people enjoy hearing me on this show, I urge you to also go check out a new podcast I'm doing with my buddy Bede Germain, and that is Bede and Trev versus the Big Apple. A few years ago, Bede started a podcast called Bede versus the Living Dead, where he looks at every remake, reimagining, sequel, spin-off of Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead is my favorite movie of all time, so I found that podcast, reached out to him, ended up being on a guest on that a few times, and he's wanted to do these spin-offs where him and a different person look at different franchises or whatever. And the concept we came up with for our show is it's Bede and Trev versus the Big Apple, and we are looking at all movies either set in or filmed in or both New York City from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, which is a kind of movie I'm just totally obsessed with. I've never even been to New York City. That's kind of one of the jokes of the podcast, is neither of us have. But I've always been fascinated by the griminess, the sleaziness, and just the inherent compellingness of New York City in the 70s and 80s. And if you show me a movie in New York in the 70s and 80s, I'm always just down for it. So we're doing a monthly show where we look at different genres too. We're doing action, drama, comedy. We're trying to hit on everything. And again, that's Bede and Trev versus the Big Apple. It has its own podcast feeds, or you can find it as part of the Bede versus the Living Dead feed. And I'm very, very excited about it. And we just kicked it off with an episode looking at Night of the Juggler. So just wanted to throw out a plug. And so I had to, because Chris won't watch any movies made in the 70s or 80s, except under extreme duress, I had to start a whole other podcast for it.
Hey, well, I will watch stuff in the 90s, and Home Alone 2 Lost in New York is there, and we just lost the great Canadian icon Catherine O'Hara. So
your second favorite cast member of Home Alone 2. We all know who the first one is. He's got that little cameo in the lobby. You know what I'm talking about.
You son of a bitch.
No, that's a good point. Rest in peace to a fucking legend, man. That one hurt. Not gonna lie. That one, some different celebrity deaths hit at different levels, and Catherine O'Hara was kind of the ones that I just took for granted and never thought we'd have to think about a world without Catherine O'Hara.
Totally.
And that sucked.
Yeah. Not to put a damper on your plug there.
No, it had nothing to do with my plug, but yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Look,
well,
it's the highs and the lows of the world,
Yeah. Yeah. Especially now. Cool. Cheating on me. Great. Okay. What are we talking about today? Oh yeah, girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about a new theme too.
New
Yeah.
Theme. Yeah.
And sometimes we really bust our ass to come up with like really funny, really clever, theme names, and then sometimes we're just tired.
Yes.
And that is why we are starting our new theme this month: the girl with the failed February franchises. It is alliterative. I mean, I'll give it that.
It is. It's nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great.
No,
but it's
not our best. But I'd argue it's not our worst. So
no, we've had worse.
Yeah,
we've had worse for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess we're looking at
the two Hollywood attempts to start a cinematic franchise with the characters of Mikael Blomkvist and, more importantly, Lisbeth Salander from the Stieg Larsson Millennium series of books. And we'll talk about this whole history of it. But obviously there was also a series of Swedish films, but we are talking about specifically the two Hollywood movies. Mm-hmm. And starting this episode with 2011's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So Chris, tell us about it.
For sure. It is directed by one David Fincher, one of our greats. Of course, Seven, Zodiac, Fight Club, The Social Network.
Bet you never thought you'd end up on our show, did you, David? But here you are.
Yeah, totally. Written by another prestigious talent in Hollywood, Steve Zalian. He wrote Schindler's List. Heard of it? Mm-hmm. That comedy. Anyway, sorry.
See, okay. I just told you who his favorite cast member of Home Alone 2 was. You didn't.
Okay. Clear and Present Danger is another one he's written. Mission Impossible, the original one. Gangs of New York, and Moneyball. Moneyball kind of set him on the path to do this movie. It is based on the 2005 novel by Stieg Larsson, as Trev just mentioned, which was published posthumously. I didn't realize that. And translated into English in 2008. So in 2009, Hollywood ramped up the efforts to get this movie made, and especially in conjunction with the Swedish films that were happening.
Because 2009 is the first Swedish film, The Girl with
Yes.
the Dragon Tattoo. Yep.
So, of course, Dragon Tattoo is based on the first book of the Millennium series. Originally a trilogy. I guess there's a bunch more books that other writers have taken on to do. So, this
And it was originally intended to be more than a trilogy, but I'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, the Stieg Larsson series is set now because of his untimely death as a trilogy.
Yeah. Untimely. How did he die? I didn't actually look that up.
Heart attack after walking up the stairs to his apartment.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He was only 50, I think, or 55. He was very, very young.
Damn.
Yep.
Budget, 90 million. Domestic, it made 102 million. Worldwide, $233 million, which is actually pretty damn good. Yeah, pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So
we will definitely talk about what the heck here. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess let's start where you seem to want to go here with Stieg Larsson a little bit, and this trilogy of novels and such. But
yeah, I mean, I think obviously if we're going to talk about the movie, and it's important to just set the context of why was Hollywood so set on making this into a movie so quickly, and why did it happen so fast, and why were they so excited about a movie in the first place? And I can just attest to that because, as you know, I've worked in bookstores for a very, very long time. And in fact, around the time that this series was hitting its English translations, this is when I was working at Borders Books and Music before it went out of business here in the States. And I remember it's interesting to look back on this now because I think this is maybe already slightly forgotten, but what a huge sensation this trilogy was, especially when those English translations happened. It was a huge deal here. The Lisbeth Salander novels, the Millennium series, whatever you want to call it. They caught fire. They're such a big deal. So I read them as they were being published because everybody was talking about them. They were the publishing sensation of the moment in that kind of mystery genre. And obviously a lot of that had to come with the fact that they were published posthumously. So there was kind of already this inherent story and controversy about the behind the scenes elements of them, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But that fed into them, getting so much attention. And it also helped that as they were coming out here in America, right away, the Swedish films were also hitting. And the Swedish films enjoyed, obviously, minor releases here. They played at some art theaters. I saw them at some smaller theaters in Ann Arbor. But primarily, I think most people are seeing them on video or, when they would show up on cable later, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
They weren't huge box office successes in America or whatever, but they did pretty well for foreign films. And if nobody remembers this, they are actually, those movies are what made, at least to an American audience, I guess worldwide, it's what made Noomi Rapace a star, because she played Lisbeth in the Swedish series. And in fact, even then, Mikael Nyquist, who played Mikael Blomkvist in those movies, he went on to have he also had an untimely death, sadly enough. But before that, he enjoyed a little brief run in Hollywood where he was the bad guy in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol and John Wick. So, both of them got some Hollywood attention off of that as well. But it was just kind of cool that just as the novels were hitting American bookstores and everyone was getting into them, it was hey, did you know there's also movies you can go watch of these right now?
Totally.
because the Swedish market cranked those movies out very fast. In fact, it was this bizarre thing where they had the first one made as a theatrical feature, and then right away they went right into filming the next two books. They filmed them just together, and were going to release them as TV movies. So they were made for TV. And then the first Swedish movie was such a big box office success, which they didn't expect. They quickly went back and tinkered with those two movies and ended up releasing them theatrically. And then later on, they went and re-edited all three and then ultimately put them together as a TV miniseries. So they've kind of been released every different way in Sweden.
Sure.
But it was just it was huge over there. It was huge here. I will tell you this, Chris. I don't know if you've read any of my Letterboxd reviews. I think I mentioned this when I was reviewing the Swedish ones. There was a period in my life around this time where, for a brief moment, I even wore a bracelet that said, "What would Lisbeth do?" because we got them as promotional items at the bookstore for when the third book was going to finally be published and the third movie was on the way at the same time. And I had that bracelet for a while. So I was really into this. I was really into this book series. I was really into those Swedish films. And it was I definitely was caught up in the hype of it and the excitement of it. So that will like feed into my feelings on this film for sure. But I just wanted to like establish that.
Yeah, what would Lisbeth do? You're just going around and sodomizing rapists with
Yeah, do giant dildos. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's cool. I didn't realize how. I mean, I guess I should have known, but like how into this IP you really were.
I'm not surprised that you don't know, because that's the thing is what I mentioned earlier is like it's hard to say I still am, because it's not a series that I feel like held on. Now, as you said, there's been books since the case. So here's just a little. I won't spend like a long time on this, but the behind the scenes story on this is Stieg Larsson himself was a journalist in Sweden, and primarily he was a very, very liberal, socially liberal journalist who reported primarily on the rise of like right-wing Nazi extremism in Sweden, and he was always writing about that. And he was very, very interested in that. And because of that, he made a lot of like political enemies. He had constant death threats. There was people who wanted to kill him, like in the right-wing circles and in the white supremacist circles. And so he had this long-term girlfriend, and because in Sweden it's actually the law that if you get married, your address as a married couple has to be published publicly. So they decided never to get married to protect themselves, because he didn't want their address, and he especially didn't want her targeted. The reason I bring this up is he started writing this series. He had written the first 3, and he already had the 3 written, and he got attention from publishers, and they decided to go ahead and start publishing them. He had a 10-book plan. And he had started work on the 4th, and he had notes drafted for the 5th and the 6th. And he was about, depending on what you hear, either halfway through the 4th or 2/3 through the 4th when he had that heart attack and died.
Right.
Now, here's where it gets complicated. Here's the problem: because he never married his girlfriend, Swedish law says that even though she has all that stuff, right? She has his manuscript for the 4th book. She has all his notes. She had no legal right to his work, unfortunately. And instead, his brother and his father, who he was estranged from and didn't really have much of a relationship with, they were given his like literary rights. And they could never come to any agreement with his girlfriend. It's like a family dispute that I think is ongoing to this day. She has even said she thinks she could finish the book, but she has like no rights to publish it. And ultimately, his family hired a different writer, David Lagercrantz, to come in and write a second trilogy, which continued the story of Lisbeth and Blomkvist past these books. And then once his was wrapped up, another author has started a new trilogy, which I think is 2 books in now, and she's working on the 3rd. I can't remember her name offhand. But all this to say, they still sell okay, but those other author ones are obviously not the big deal. So when I say I'm not surprised that you don't know that I'm a huge fan of it, it's just because this is a series and a character that I think had a really big moment right when all this was happening, and then it kind of flamed out a little bit because the interest just isn't as high on the other authors, because we'll never really know. It's like this wasn't his original intention, you know? It's like someone else. Not to say obviously characters can outlive their creators. A lot of them do, and I'm not like inherently like against the fact of other writers writing these. There's just always that thing about knowing like this isn't what he intended.
Yeah.
The kind of like ugliness of knowing his father and his brother are taking advantage of like the law, which won't let his girlfriend publish the actual book. So there's just some kind of nastiness to it too.
2 things: are there conspiracy theories on his death?
I don't know.
Right?
I don't know. Like okay. You'd have to probably talk to people in Sweden about that. I'm sure there probably is, but I would never went down that rabbit hole.
Not to fan those flames. I'm not even
no.
into that. I'm just
yeah.
It is, you say the backstory and his political enemies and he has an untimely death. Okay. Well.
Yeah.
But there's that, and number 2, do you think that this property fell out of the cultural consciousness because of Hollywood flailing with it?
I actually do have theories about why it fell out of public consciousness, and
okay.
because it's you. Oh, so we should just can we just briefly in like 2 sentences summarize what the series is?
Yeah, please do so.
So the series, this will save us some time later, I guess. But the idea of the series follows 2 main characters. So Mikael Blomkvist is essentially he is a stand-in for Stieg Larsson.
Totally.
He's very much Stieg Larsson in the books, right? He is also a journalist who writes. He publishes a magazine called Millennium in Sweden, which is the same kind of magazine that Stieg Larsson was involved in. A magazine that's trying to expose business corruption and extremism in politics and everything. And throughout the course of these books, he is also ends up teaming up with this character named Lisbeth Salander, who is this mysterious computer hacker with a dark past, who is working as a researcher for like a security firm. And we'll talk maybe later when you do your plot description, everything about how these two characters end up together.
Sure.
But they eventually are thrown together to help solve a decades-long murder mystery, essentially, that ends up having ties into a lot of things you joked about at the beginning, right? Nazism and pedophilia and all these like very dark and twisted things. Yeah. And that's very interesting to both of them because he's very interested in exposing this kind of corruption. And we discover throughout the course of the series that she has this dark past where she is just so, her whole thing is she's the girl who hurts men who hurt women. She hates men who hate women. And in fact, the actual translation of the Swedish title of the first novel is not Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That is the title the American publishers came up with. And so every time they do a new one, it's the girl with something. That's just an American convention. The actual name of the first book, the direct translation is just Men Who Hate Women. That's the name of the book in Sweden. And that's because that's what Lisbeth is all about, is finding men like that and destroying them because of her past. But so to my point to that is, you'd think a series, especially because once the whole like kind of wave of this died, what happened in like American media and culture and pop culture was the Me Too movement.
Yeah, totally.
And it seemed like it seemed like this is a character that really should have like kept going.
Off.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk about this more in our next episode when we look at the next movie. But I think some of the directions the later books took the series, and even maybe some of like the missteps, like arguable missteps that Larsson maybe made with the next two books, and I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Maybe didn't give the series the continued traction it could have. So, but yeah, I think Hollywood flailing with it doesn't help. If we had got like a real big Hollywood franchise out of this, then of course this character would still be more like in the public zeitgeist.
Well, and like, I guess I ask because, my backstory with this franchise, in all of its medium, is just this movie from 2011. Fincher's movie is my gateway into it, and like it starts and stops here. For me, I never went back to watch the Swedish films, nor have I read the books. But I do want to ask you, like later on when we dissect the movie, I want to know, like, what's the better adaptation? I kind of want to know, just so you can log this for yourself. I kind of want to know your thoughts on that, and then also maybe like you're saying, like the mistakes that the movies did compared to the books on the Swedish side, and if maybe this Fincher version would have been able to sidestep that if it was to continue forward. So
yeah, no, I have answers for all those questions.
Awesome.
Can I just briefly ask you? I'm just curious. Did you ever have any interest, especially as someone I know you're a New Maria Pace fan? Did you ever have any interest in going back and checking out those movies? Or?
You know what? Honestly, yes. It's just one of those things. Like, it's just one of those things that I'm like, okay, well, I have to commit to 3 movies, which, of course, in the grand scheme of things is fucking nothing. So I can really only blame myself. And then when we started this podcast, 5.5 years ago, it was on the list. So I was like, okay, well, it was just one of those things. Like, I have no one to blame here. I should get back to it. And after this discussion, it will maybe even put it higher up on my queue. So yeah, I was kind of waiting to, honestly talk to you about them. If I'm
of course.
So
yeah.
And not that I really care about spoilers either. I just, for this long-term franchise over all these years, I missed out. So whatever. Right? I just kind of want to know about it. Yeah, that's the books.
Yeah, that's the backstory on that.
Yeah. So, as Trev was saying, the Swedish films are really hot. The books are really hot. And Hollywood needs to capitalize. So, Sony is the ones to step up. Who's it? Amy Pascal, famed Amy Pascal, is looking to get the rights. Scott Rudin gets the rights, the full copyrights to Sony to make the American version, and they need their Mikael and they need their Lisbeth. So Daniel Craig at this time is super hot, of course. He's in the middle of Bond, and they really want him. They try George Clooney, they try Viggo Mortensen, they try even Brad Pitt, but
Johnny Depp too, which was a weird one. But
that was a weird one. Yeah, I don't know if it's like some secret window stuff. I don't think we need him. But Daniel Craig is the guy that they want, so much so that they actually compromise with him on his schedule. Of course, he's making all the Bond movies, but then also he's making Cowboys and Aliens that's supposed to come out that year. So they kind of postpone the whole thing to get him on board. And then they're looking at Lisbeth, I guess Rooney Mara. It sounds like lots of actresses.
So do you remember this? Like, I remember when they were working on the American one, this was like a thing in the trades for months, because this was the most in demand like female role in years in Hollywood. Every actress wanted to play this part.
Because again, Trev, the people that didn't live through this time in 2009 to 2011. We cannot stress enough just how hot this property was.
Yeah.
So yes, we got Carey Mulligan, Jennifer Lawrence, Scarlett Johansson, Anne Hathaway, Lea Seydoux, Sarah Snook, Kristen Stewart, Olivia Thirlby, Emma Watson, Evan Rachel Wood, Emily Browning, Ava Green, like everybody.
Even Yolanda Visser from Die Antwoord.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which actually, I can see
Makes sense.
I can see that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But what really pushes Rooney Mara to the forefront, she made it to the final four, and obviously won the role, but it's because David Fincher was on board from really the beginning of this whole development with Sony. And Fincher had worked with her on The Social Network.
Yeah. And in fact, to go back to a previous episode of ours, she credits David Fincher because after her experience with Nightmare on Elm Street, which we had done before, and talked about she had a miserable experience making that movie, and guess what? We get it, Rooney, because we had a miserable experience watching you in that movie. But she was like ready to quit acting, and then said that work on The Social Network like rekindled her love for acting. So her and Fincher have just been like very tight ever since.
Yeah. So that's your Lisbeth, and that's your Mikael. So
yeah.
And again, this movie took off real fast. That's one thing I really want to say too. There's not a lot of backstory because this was the iron was hot. They had to strike it. They wrote the script in 6 months. They researched the book for another 3 months before that. I mean, this movie was like hot off the presses.
Yeah,
so.
and to Rooney Mara's credit, she really did like immediately kind of throw herself into this role too, because I called Lisbeth just a mysterious computer hacker. We should talk about she's like a very like punk coded character. She's very antisocial. She has a very particular like dark goth appearance, and Rooney Mara like kind of physically like recreated herself. Right, she not only went as far as dyeing her hair black, cutting it into this like jagged punk haircut, but she went and actually got all of Lisbeth's actual piercings. You know, she like lost a bunch of weight. She bleached her eyebrows. She really went for it in a way maybe some of those other actresses wouldn't have been willing to. And I remember like the lead up to this, I'm sure you remember this too, like a lot of the press runs was just like, oh my god, look at Rooney Mara, look at what she kind of put herself through.
It's funny because Fincher's kind of quoted here thinking it would be difficult to get Rooney Mara to that place, right? Of Salander's like look, and her antisocial demeanor and all that. Me and you have talked about Rooney Mara in the past a couple times. She seems miserable, like constantly. I mean, maybe because she's married to Joaquin Phoenix right now, so like they just seem like the most miserable people in the world, but yet so successful. So anyway,
were there any other names in that list though that you would have been interested in? Like when you hear like that casting list, like because there's someone there that to me is just like right off the bat, like Scarlett Johansson, no, terrible, right? Jennifer Lawrence,
but Kristen Stewart, yes.
Kristen Stewart, yes. I remember that is who I was pulling for at the time. That's who I thought would make the most sense in my mind. But then maybe that's me just doing the obvious thing, and I mean that is an issue. I do believe like I know a lot of people were really pulling for Natalie Portman at the time, but yeah, there's definitely just some in there where I don't get it,
like Eva Green.
Eva Green doesn't make sense at all.
No, just because she has the connection to Daniel Craig, like that's what they're going for. Obviously, is kind of more like a chemistry thing. But she's just too, she's too beautiful. I don't know. You can't be, you can't be doing this.
Yeah.
You got to strike the right balance of. You can't be all that physically imposing. I don't think. I think you have to have the character of Lisbeth. I think you have to worry for her until you don't have to.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no. At different points in the book, in the series, she is very much a victim that you were worried about, and other times she's very much an avenger who is in like the total control. And
Totally.
and both have to work. And you know what? We didn't even mention this. It should be said. Like we kind of alluded to this because I mentioned how the Swedish films made Noomi Rapace a star, and that was like even true on the Hollywood side. Like I said, these Swedish films were. I don't want to like overstate it. They weren't like huge box office hits here, right? But they got enough of a reputation that suddenly you did see Noomi Rapace being cast in like Prometheus and Sherlock Holmes too, right? Like Hollywood wanted to capitalize on her right away. And I guess you would probably just agree on this just from like your own perception of it, but the people who did see that movie, the fan base really liked Noomi Rapace as Lisbeth. And in fact, there was a campaign to get her to just replay, to do the role in the American films. And she kind of put the kibosh on that, saying like, no, I love that character too much. I can't go back to it, especially just to do the same stories. I already did. There's no point to it. I'd rather see someone else take it on. But that's just to say, like, that's another challenge for any actress coming in, is that you have to like take over a role that someone just did like not a long time ago, 2 years ago, right? Yeah, and the fan base loved them, you know. And now you have to come and be like, here's my version. Like that's tough. A lot of pressure, you know. Yeah. Yeah,
and I mean, I don't really want to give it away, but like we'll tell you, listeners, if we think that worked or not. But huge pressure. Just to describe Lisbeth's character even more, I loved Andrew O'Hare from Salon called her a feminist revenge angel.
Yeah.
I love that. Those 3 words are perfect. Perfect. So I just want to throw that there. That's the backstory. Like it's like I said, pretty quick, I wouldn't say obvious, but this movie needed to get into production right away.
Well, some of it is obvious, right? Like even the score, cool. He's gonna use Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor again. Well, he just worked with them on Social Network.
Yeah.
So of course that makes sense, right? Like all the pieces just kind of like come together. And even let's just say it right now, like right, we can talk about this in our review, but the decision to get David Fincher to do this, to me, maybe also leans in the obvious route a little bit, right? Like
sure.
This subject matter and this movie, like who's the Hollywood director who makes the most sense? Let's get David Fincher, right? Let's get the Seven guy, the Zodiac guy, you know, the guy who his career has been largely defined by looks at like violence and serial killers, the guy who when he was a kid grew up in the shadow of the Zodiac killer and that has clearly defined so much of his like, you know, persona. Let's have him do another serial killer movie. Like that seemed pretty obvious too.
And he's just such a clinical filmmaker. And some would say he's cold, but I would say cold in a good way. But I think his sensibilities, his visual language, are a match made in heaven for a subject matter in a thriller like this. I think like who else? Obviously, Fincher is the obvious one, right? And he got it, but like. Really, who else on the top of your head with that much cachet, with that much talent that can really get whatever he wants done, especially coming off the Social Network, and Benjamin Button actually, right? Like that was a huge success. What other director do you think could have tackled this?
You wouldn't want to see Judd Apatow's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo,
or Brett Ratner's.
Brett Ratner's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a very different movie.
Yes. Yeah, like, but for real, like, is there a director you can, off the top of your head, think of this?
No, I mean, like I said, yeah, that's what I mean. It just seemed like David Fincher was the obvious one. I mean, there's other directors I think could have done it. You know, like the directors who have proven themselves kind of like, you know, steady hands at any kind of adaptation. Like, could Ridley Scott probably do this well? Yeah, I think so. Right?
Maybe.
But
Spielberg. But honestly, I love Spielberg, but he couldn't do a movie like this.
No, Spielberg, you wouldn't want to do it.
No.
You would need someone who has shown some capacity for like some sense of darkness to them for sure. Yeah.
You need somebody that's not afraid to show you the abhorrent side of human nature and society, and you know what I mean.
Like my answer is probably it's a problem of timing, right? Like you guys, who else would it be? Well, Brian De Palma, but not at this point anymore. You know, he wasn't like in fashion anymore. So like this is like everything about Girl with the Dragon Tattoo screams Brian De Palma of the 70s or 80s to make it.
Sure,
you know, but that time had passed.
Because really this movie that we're about to talk about, our darkest film that we've ever covered?
I mean, is that almost unquestionable? Perhaps,
It has to be, right? Yeah.
And in fact, we even we'll talk about this too. Like the fact that it was such as big of a hit as it was, and I know you will say, like Sony has said, like maybe it wasn't as big as they wanted to be. They're the ones who came up with the either clever or stupid, depending on your perspective, decision to release it at Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
Like they sold it. I remember the teaser trailer. They called it the feel bad movie of the Christmas season. They very much sold it on this is a very dark film with some very dark subject matter. Yeah.
One of the greatest teaser trailers of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And credit sequences, which we'll get to. Okay, let's get to it. Let's just talk about the movie. I think we're jumping around, and let's talk about the girl with the dragon tattoo.
She's one of the best investigators I had.
But?
She's different.
In what way?
In every way.
Something wrong with the report?
Anything you chose not to disclose?
He's clean, in my opinion. He's honest.
Our credibility isn't dead yet.
Mine is.
He's had a long-standing sexual relationship with his co-editor of the magazine. Sometimes he pleasures her. Not often enough, in my opinion.
No, you're right not to include that. I need your help. You come stay on the island. A way of avoiding all those people you might want to avoid right now. You will be investigating thieves, misers, bullies, the most detestable collection of people that you will ever meet. My family. This is Harriet. Someone in the family murdered Harriet. And for the past 40 years has been trying to drive me insane. Those are from her, and the rest from her killer.
You failed to adapt to 4 foster homes. Were arrested twice for intoxication, twice for assault. How many partners have you had in the last month? And how many of those were men?
I should have control of my money.
And you will, once you learn to be sociable. Why don't we start with me? You know what to do.
I can't find something you've been unable to find in 40 years.
You don't know that. You have a very keen investigative mind.
You were here that day.
A terrible day. Searching, not finding.
I never found a body.
Was it spontaneous?
Was it calculated?
Did she know something someone wished she didn't?
The last time I reported on something without being absolutely sure, I lost my life savings. I need a research assistant.
I know an excellent one. She did the background check on you.
The what?
You don't think we could hire just anyone for something like this?
It's Mikael Blomkvist. May I come in? We need to talk.
Hey! Who do you think you are?
Put some clothes on. Get rid of your girlfriend. Can I call you Lisbeth? I want you to help me catch a killer of women. I've got absolutely no idea how they're connected to the death of a 16-year-old girl. Don't you need to look over these?
I got it.
It's better to look at what I am about to show you on an empty stomach.
What are you doing?
Reading your notes?
They're encrypted.
Please.
Rape, torture, fire, animals, religion. Am I missing anything?
The names. I may have something.
Nobody likes people poking around in their lives.
Everybody knows why you're here.
Someone killed her. Someone on the island that day.
If a woman approaches any beast and dies with it, you shall kill the woman and the beast.
These people are insane.
Soon you will know us all, only too well, with my apologies.
After being successfully sued for libel by a wealthy industrialist, investigative journalist Mikael Blomkvist accepts an offer from Henrik Vanger to write about their family history. But what Henrik really wants Mikael to do is to find out what happened to his niece Harriet, who went missing 40 years ago. At first, Mikael isn't interested, until Henrik offers to help clear his name. Mikael eventually believes that Harriet's disappearance might have something to do with some serial killings that took place 20 years before she disappeared, so he asks for a research assistant. Enter Lisbeth Salander, a brilliant hacker with an extremely troubled past and an even more wicked personality. Both Lisbeth and Mikael must now work together to uncover the deadly secrets this family has worked so hard to stay hidden.
Chris, what I think is interesting is you and I are coming at this movie from two totally different perspectives. Mm-hmm. You are probably like the target audience that Sony was like looking for, right? Someone who has, first of all, not read the books, but probably more importantly, had not just seen the Swedish films, right? So right. I think that's the audience that they were probably more hoping to pull in. Whereas I came into this having not only read the book, but also seeing the Swedish film. So I actually think it'd be interesting for you to go first here, because I want to hear the perspective of someone who was like, who goes into this cold. And this, as you said, this is your introduction to the world. This is your girl with the dragon tattoo.
Sure. Went into this cold. Pun unintended, by the way.
Yeah.
I have a love-like relationship with this movie.
Okay.
So I saw this, I believe, opening weekend. And since then, I own the first print Blu-ray of it, the beautiful edition that they originally produced. I've seen it twice then, and now this would be my fourth viewing of this movie. And this viewing, I'm just going to say it, I really loved it, watching it this time around. I go back and forth for reasons which I'll get to later, but I never dislike it. I think I'm even guilty of this, but I think people look back on this as maybe a lesser Fincher film, and I think it's because it didn't continue. Where on its own, up until the last 20 minutes of the movie, I think is just fantastic. And, it's cold, it's destitute, it's isolated. The cinematography that Fincher and his crew have put together is immaculate, like all of his movies. But it like means something thematically. And there's just something sinister behind beneath every single scene of this. It's just Fincher's perfect at setting that kind of mood, and I just really love Mikael and Lisbeth as a character, as characters, as a duo, because I've seen some people knock this movie for it's obvious, it's obvious who's doing the murders, okay, and in my opinion, I don't think that's the point. The point of this movie is it's not about the reveal. It's about the journey for the truth. And I think Fincher shows that by so much of the investigation between both these people and how much they lean on each other and how different how different their worlds are, and the camaraderie that they build and the genuine admiration they have for each other is phenomenal. And I think the beginning of this movie, the first hour is really good, but it takes a little too long. But when Lisbeth and Mikael become one, with the story, the movie really pops off for me. I think they are just so good together. I think Rooney Mara is amazing as this character. This is the best she's ever been, still to this day. And Daniel Craig is so versatile, as we see with the Knives Out films. Like, the guy can really do anything, but he's so believable as this investigative journalist who's trying to clear his name. And I love their sexual chemistry. You buy it. I have a lot more in detail to say, but really this movie really hit for me this time, especially probably as good as it was when I saw it in theaters back then. Was this viewing? I loved it. This is a 2.5 hour. But you would say
it's still that last 20 minutes to keep you from going all the way with it. Okay,
that's exactly it. So can I just get there now? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a 2.5 hour movie, and it is propulsive as hell. The editing is fantastic, so much so it won Best Editing at the Oscars. So there's never a dull moment. You're never bored. But then the movie wraps up, but there's still 20 minutes to go.
Yeah.
And that 20 minutes is so rushed. It's so contrived. It's not interesting at all.
Yeah.
And it's not satisfying. And it just robs any catharsis that you are feeling with them solving the preceding narrative. So again, I think this movie is fantastic, but then it kind of sucks. And then I kind of got to bring my rating down. However, again, I really am a huge fan of this movie. I've seen it 4 times now. I will be watching it over and over again. I do not think it's lesser Fincher, but I think that last 20 minutes leaves a sour taste in almost everybody's mouth that I've ever talked to about this film. So, anyway.
So this is like before we recorded this episode, I had actually reached out to and said that there was like a part of me that wishes you had gone and watched the Swedish film. And then I was like, oh yeah, but in retrospect, I'm actually glad you didn't, because we get to have this conversation through 2 different prisms, right? Yeah. And so I want to make very clear that like everything I'm going to say about this movie, I'm filtering through something I'm going to call the Nightmare Alley factor. So let me explain the Nightmare Alley factor. Okay. And you might already know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Which is that I heard that one of my favorite directors and one of your favorite directors, Guillermo del Toro, was making a new movie called Nightmare Alley at the time with Leonardo DiCaprio. So I was very, very excited. And I heard, it's this like adaptation of a book, but there's already like a previous movie, like a classic, 40s movie. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to see that movie then to see to see the original story and see and then kind of compare what Del Toro did. So a couple like months before the Del Toro version comes out, I sit down and watch the original Nightmare Alley with Tyrone Power and love it. I was blown away. I was like, this is fucking great. I can see exactly why Del Toro wants to make this, right? And then I keep hearing these interviews with him where he's saying, "Oh, I'm not remaking that movie. I'm doing my version of the book." It's not, and so I get excited about that because I always like that idea, right? Where a director says like, no, I'm not remaking that. I'm going to take the book and make my version. And then I sit down and go to see his Nightmare Alley, and I watched the same fucking movie I watched 2 months ago, And it turns out, I guess both filmmakers really did a pretty decent adaptation of the book, right? Okay. And except the original 1940s one tacked on a happy ending, which he wisely left off. I give him that. But that last 30 seconds, that's kind of stupid in the original, to me doesn't dismiss the whole movie. So I still felt a sense of, boy, everything here on a technical level is the usual Del Toro amazingness, and I can see like why people really were taken with it. But as someone who just watched the story, it's not hitting for me on the same level.
Right.
So that's where I come to this girl with the dragon tattoo, and this is where it gets tricky for me because I do feel like it's lesser Fincher, but I have to admit that for me, that's entirely dictated by the fact that I watch this movie. And I read all that behind the scenes stuff that you and I looked at, where they talk about how Steve Zalian talks about how he spent 6 months working on the screenplay and like researching the book, and then him and Fincher sat down and had all these in-depth discussions about the psychology of rapists and the psychology of serial killers, and they put all this like work into dissecting these characters in this book. And I think like all that work went into making the same movie I had just seen.
Interesting. Interesting.
And that, so you I know one of your questions for me is like, what's the better version? I will say I still prefer the Swedish version. But I think what people will probably be most surprised by is, and I'm interested to hear if you get around to watching the next few months, if you agree, like, obviously there's this perception that David Fincher is one of our greats, like no one will deny that. David Fincher has a sterling reputation as one of our best living filmmakers. The Swedish film is directed by a filmmaker named Niels Arden Oplev, fairly acclaimed for some of the roles he's done, or work he's done, but certainly not a David Fincher, right? Mm-hmm. And you would think like, well, his must seem so much cheaper and so much crappier. And it's very shocking how much of it just plays the same, and to me it looks the same and just kind of has the same tone. Obviously there's some Fincher stylistic things that are different, but yeah, because I had just seen this movie and I liked it already, and I really love New Pace and Michael Nyqvist as these characters, I had a harder time connecting to this version just because I felt like been there, done that, So you and I try to, like, when we do movies that are like remakes, we try to like not compare the two, but I think that's like pointless with this one because this is a movie that came out 2 years after the original film, and it really felt like that situation to me that I always get annoyed about. This just happened recently too, where I still haven't seen it, but that recent horror movie that I know you liked with James McAvoy, Speak No Evil, and remember I told you like I just don't feel like watching that right now because I just saw that this is a remake from 2 years ago. I just saw the original, like I don't need to watch it again. And then that's kind of how I felt on this, where it's just like it was so soon. It feels like, and I hate this, when Hollywood makes a movie because they know Hollywood audiences won't watch movies with subtitles. And totally. That's all it is, Like they could have just put out the Swedish version, given it a wider release. Sony could have bought it maybe and given it a wider release, but they're like, no, we got to make our version. We got to put our Hollywood stamp on it. And that kind of bums me out. And then I watch it and you go, well, yeah, but it's pretty much the same. Really? So I don't think it's a bad movie. I think I have some slight disagreements with you. And again, this is maybe all entirely from comparison's sake. I'm not super into Daniel Craig in this movie, and we'll talk about that. I think Rooney Mara is greatness. I agree with you. I think this is her best work by far. I prefer the New Pace version. I'll talk more about that, but I'm not taking anything away from Rooney Mara. It's not apples and oranges, but it's just two different takes, right?
Isn't she just like the perfect blend of like miserable wit and like angry annoyance? Like I feel like
she is, but I also feel like, it's tough because you're also looking at it from everyone reads a book and brings different things into the book and has different perspectives. Mm-hmm. So I bet you there are people who read the book who, for them, the Rooney Mara version is closer to what they read. I would say the New Pace version is closer to what I read, right? So that's all entirely subjective. Sure. I think sometimes the Rooney Mara version to me of Lisbeth feels almost too alien, like almost too strange. And I think the New Pace version is like a little bit more grounded and realistic, and maybe has like a slight there's like a more effective sympathetic edge to it. But again, I'm not. I'm going to come across something negative in this because I'm going to do the work of kind of comparing the two. Sure. But I like this movie. Like I don't have anything against it. I know, and believe me, I that is coming through. You don't sound like you're a hater. Yeah, it's just, but even now, like because I decided, and I sent you my text, and you're probably not surprised. Before we did this, I rewatched the Swedish trilogy because I hadn't seen them in a long time. I own the Blu-rays of those, and I did it to myself again. Right, I just watched them. So then when I sat down to watch this one, I was watching the same story I just watched like 4 nights previous. You know, and the revelations are all the same. So many of the sequences, the torture scene with Blomkvist at the end is just like so, like visually it looks so similar. Some of the flashback to the parade, the important flashback to the character of Harriet, like in the pictures in the parade, it looks so similar. I'm sure they probably filmed on like the same street, and that's probably because that's the street. Like they found it. So it's weird because you're just watching the same thing, and it's almost like I wish Fincher had like gone crazier with it or something, but
I guess
to his credit, go ahead.
Okay, I'll ask this because obviously it sounds, I mean, you're making it seem like it is like kind of shot for shot, but I guess what I'll say this is like, when it comes to I'm going to ask you how to rate sexual assault. Okay. So get ready. Okay. So this is a very effective movie for me. I've said this in the past on many episodes. Well, maybe not many episodes, but that like sexual assault in film just obviously rubs me the wrong way. But I also think it needs a very deft hand to handle it, and it should be zero titillation. This in this movie is like one of the most horrifying, despicably shot sexual assaults I've ever seen in movies. Mm-hmm. Like I was disgusted again watching it. I'm always disgusted by it. I'm like my wife was in another room, and I was like worried that she was going to come out at the time when that was all happening. And I'm like, oh, just because it's so villainous. Mm-hmm. And even the way he shoots, her social worker's manager's hand, like covering her head, is like a fucking disgusting Thanos-like villain. You know what I mean? Like it's just so like abhorrent. And I think the sexual assault stuff is so horrifying and so extreme here that it really makes me understand Lisbeth's worldview, like even that much further. She's extreme because she's been extremely taken advantage of. And I guess my question is, in the Swedish version, is it, I guess, is this American one more Fincherized when it comes to that?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but no. Like that scene is horrifying in the Swedish version as well.
Okay, interesting.
And like the guy is super sleazy in the Swedish version as well. And in fact, this is like tricky because like I agree with you, like those scenes are always very intense.
Yeah.
I would argue that because I think if anything, the American version goes on just a little bit longer. Actually, the sexual assault scene, but it's just as intense and just as brutal and just as like graphic. I would say in the American or in the Swedish version, the American version like adds a line of dialogue that to me felt like dumbing down's not the right right term, but like the idea of like American audiences need things spelled out to them a little bit more or something. So like apologies because we're talking about some very disturbing,
I know what you're gonna say.
stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the moment where he actually says to her like, I forgot to ask, do you like anal sex? You know, like that line is not spoken in the Swedish version. It's just clear from what we see happening and her reaction that is what's happening, right? And the fact that they add that line to the American one, I remember like watching and being like, oh, you didn't need to like say it, you know? So it like that kind of like was like where I feel like sometimes the American one is like, well, we got to make sure the audience understands what's happening here, and it's like no, but like no, and then like her later revenge sequence, I feel like plays out very similar.
Just to me, like in this is like one of the best revenges I've ever seen in movies as well. I'm just
but
like,
again, like I'm going to be very interested to hear back from you eventually if you do watch the Swedish version, because like even the thing of her like getting back at him with her like with a dildo and everything, right? That's like it's visualized almost the same way in the Swedish film, and so even
the way like she kicks it and everything, hey.
There's a shot in the Swedish film I remember where it's like kind of the camera's above and you can kind of like you can see it like sticking out of his backside, you know, and like
And listeners, I hope it's not sounding too much like what'd they do here? What'd they do here? Like I hope it's not too annoying for you. I'm actually curious.
I don't want it to keep devolving into that. It's just interesting. It just goes to show like sometimes when you have two filmmakers or like you know and like two movie companies who know that this book is like so recent and it's such a literary phenomenon, everyone loves it, right? So there's probably this sense of like we need to just make the book. That's what people are responding to. Yeah. And it's kind of bound to happen, right? Like nobody wants to like deviate too far from that, but that means that you know, you're running the risk of doing the same version. Now Fincher is on record as saying he did watch the Swedish version. Because there's something in the Swedish film that wasn't in the book that he liked, and so he brought into his version. And that is after her first sexual assault, when she was forced to give oral sex to her sponsor or whatever. There's a scene in the Swedish version where they cut to her then washing her mouth out with like toothpaste. Yeah. And Fincher liked that, and he decided to keep it in his movie, but they like slightly changed it. So he's on record saying, I saw the Swedish one, and it's almost like I kind of wish he hadn't watched it. You know, because like he might not realize it, but I wonder how much that did lock into his head. And then I'll say this, and again, I like this movie, I am not here to like dismiss David Fincher, a filmmaker I like, and I hope you get where I'm coming from with this. I saw him and Zalian talking about this as well, right? Where they said like, well, when they approach this movie, it's a Swedish story, right? It's a Swedish book. It takes place in Sweden, and they're Americans now who are going to make this movie, right? This is the Hollywood movie about a Swedish story. And like, well, we need the movie to feel Swedish. So we need the movie to be so cold. It needs to be in the winter. We're going to start the movie. The song talks about the land of ice and snow, you know, everything's going to be like blue and gray scaled. And then you watch the Swedish movie made by Swedish people, and it's not like that. You know, it's like they have their like the stories taking place. It might be the winter, I don't know, but it's not snowy. The movie's not like grayscaled, and so you kind of watch it, and it's like I'm not even saying that like it's a poor creative decision, but to me, because I saw how actual Swedish filmmakers approached it, you suddenly have that sense of like, oh, this is that thing, right, where like Americans always think of Sweden this way. They have to make it where they're like, oh, a Swedish movie has to look like this. It has to be like cold, and it has to be like gray. And I don't even think apparently Swedish people don't even feel that way.
I guess like thematically it works though.
It does. I'm just, but I'm just
saying it's not like going to film something in Mexico and putting a yellow filter on it. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's I feel like from the subject matter and the thematics of what's going on, I think
you're right. I would just make
it does make sense.
You're right, and I'm saying, like I said, it's nothing that ruins the movie or anything, and it works appropriately. I'm just saying it to me. You can't deny there's a level of fun. There's a level of like humor to them saying like, well, we're doing this because it's so inherently Swedish, and then you watch the Swedish version, where they're like, no, you know, it doesn't have to be like that. You
know? Okay, tell me what you don't like about Daniel Craig, because I'm actually kind of surprised by that. I think he's pretty fantastic in here.
Daniel Craig is never bad, right? He's a never bad, I'd say. See, this is I don't want to just be comparison guy, but
you're allowed to be. By the way, I'll just say right now, you're allowed to be.
Okay,
for my sake. As your co-host, who actually wants to know, I want you to compare a little bit.
And I will admit also that I'm going to, and this is what I will admit. So I only saw this movie. I didn't see it in theaters, actually. And I didn't see it in theaters specifically. And the reason why is because I had just watched the Swedish films, right? So I just had no interest in like revisiting the story.
Hold on. I think it is just so funny that you did it to yourself again. I just find that so funny that you're like,
I know the same thing, right?
You could have easily just been like, okay, let me go into this one fresh, and I can watch those other ones after.
Don't know why I didn't realize that. Yeah, because like everything I say is now, but I guess it's fun because I think it's actually good because I am recreating the response I had the first time.
Sure,
right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so I didn't see it in the theater because I was like, I'll give it some distance. So I didn't watch it until the DVD came out. And by the way, I don't know if you remember. Oh, you do. You obviously remember this because you own it, I think, right?
Oh, yeah.
I do love how the DVD was made to look like a burnt like pirate copy when that came out. That was really cool. Back when they gave a shit about physical media releases, you know. Anyways, so I watched it when it came out on DVD, and I had the same reaction, right? Where I'm just like, yeah, it's fine, but I just seen it, right? I will say I liked Daniel Craig more this rewatch, which was my first rewatch since that time. So over 10 years now, right?
Oh,
I liked him more. But I still had the same issue, and it was more apparent back then. And this is where I'm going to be slightly unfair, but I know I'm not alone in this. I did bring in the Bond baggage. And I think like
even after Knives Out, even after all these years removed,
that's the weird thing, right? And it's like but I think it's also because you mentioned that you really like the opening credits to this. Yeah. I do not. I don't. I think they're obvious. Look, the Karen O, Trent Reznor cover of Immigrant Song is great. Obviously, it's a cool visual. I personally am not into the idea of making like the Lisbeth movies like Bond movies. Like that doesn't feel like thematically on target for me. You know, like there's just something about like.
Oh, you know what's funny? That didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a Bond themed. It's such a Bond coded opening, and having Daniel Craig there to me only like made that like more like feel like more apparent. And it just seems like it's such a weird because it's so stylistically different than anything that follows, right? So it just felt like out of place and bizarre to me. So I wasn't super into that. But because of that, like that brought even more of the Bond baggage in. And then again, if I'm allowed to compare, I just think the Michael Nyqvist character or version of Blomkvist he's like schlubbier. He just seems like more regular guy. And I fully admit, in like 2011, I watched this and I was like, "That's fucking Bond, man. This guy can handle this shit," you know. And I had a harder time disconnecting from that. Like I said, this time with more distance from Bond and with you're right, it's probably like the Knives Out thing that helped me a little bit more. So I liked him more this time. But I still was comparing him to the version I like more, which I think Nyquist's version is just like Nyquist's version seems more like a regular guy, and that's what I think Blomkvist is. And there's just something about Daniel Craig where, as both Bond and as Benoit Blanc, right? He seems like he's the guy who definitely knows what he's doing. He can handle everything, and I think it's like hard for me to turn that off with Daniel Craig. So his Blomkvist feels like he doesn't feel as vulnerable. He doesn't feel as in danger to me as the original version does.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I don't think it's a bad performance. You know what I mean? So that's
sure.
This is all tricky, but yeah.
It is definitely sounding like not to discredit your feelings either, okay?
Yeah.
But you are definitely letting the baggage in, you know?
But like I said, how do you not in this situation, right?
I guess so.
And I talked about the Nightmare Alley factor.
That one makes sense. Again, I guess.
Yeah, and that's what I say is like the Nightmare Alley factor is interesting because then you're talking about like decades apart, right? Where you can say like, well, maybe Del Toro forgot how similar it was, and like you know, or maybe he didn't sit down and watch it. And by the way, we're talking about how good Rooney Mara is in this, but terrible in his Nightmare Alley. She's actually like one of the worst things about his version.
Yeah,
and the character she plays, the actress in the original is like so much livelier. No surprise, huh? But
who knew that Rooney Mara could be a great antisocial, confident weirdo?
Yeah,
you know?
But when you say I'm bringing my baggage into this, like again, I did it to myself by doing it only days apart. But we have to remember, even this release was just like a couple years after the first one, so it was really hard not to have that baggage.
But it had critical acclaim and the money as well. So I don't know. I don't know if people really shit on it for that as much. I never really heard as much of this, especially. Well,
and like I said, like this movie made almost $300 million in the U.S. or whatever, or just a worldwide.
Worldwide 232.
Okay, yeah. So it made that much. Obviously, the Swedish versions did not make that much, right? No. So I am entirely aware that most of the audience who saw this movie and most of the critics who saw this movie did not see the Swedish versions. Right? Yeah. You had to seek out the Swedish versions if you were like really into the books, or were just like someone who was more willing to check out what you heard was like the hot new foreign film at the time, right? And they weren't like huge mainstream successes here, so they were entirely on their right to like make this and assume. This would be like most of the audience would be seeing this version for and this would be their version.
And I think maybe that's why I'm not as responsive to your Nyquist and Craig, schlubby versus more hunky, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of journalists out there that are quite hunky. You know what I mean? Like there's very, very attractive men and women that are leading the news on either front that are very
well. Believe me, when I read
especially extremely successful with a ton of money, and he's kind of a bit of a philanderer, right? Like he's sleeping with his partner in the novels and the movies.
That's funny too, because I was thinking of that because like when I read the book, I remember thinking because like in the book, as I said, if you know Stieg Larsson's backstory, it's very clear that Blomkvist is like a stand-in for him, and then you're right, like all the female characters like, oh, Mikael Blomkvist.
Yes,
and it's like, oh yeah, Stieg Larsson. I get it, and then like I bring that into the movies and I'm thinking like, well, he didn't get to see either version. He had sadly passed away. But like he was, I bet you if they asked him, who do you want to play you, Michael Nyquist or Daniel Craig? He would have said Daniel Craig. Like that's who he's choosing too.
Well, and it's more believable for me to see Lisbeth that has been tormented by absolute disgusting men in her life, to see a man that like Daniel Craig who looks like that but is also very soft and delicate with her as well, and obviously respectful, that she is like, you know what, I'm gonna fuck you whenever I want. And I think I really loved their sexual chemistry. Like when they do finally fornicate, I loved the next morning where she like made coffee and she's like sitting in the sink and they just look at each other and she's like, I like working with you. And then he's like, I like working with you too. And that's it. Then he walks away. It's just such a great, real moment for them. And did you like their chemistry in this one? Like, again, not compared to the first, but is it more believable or is it just the same? Like, are you really coming from it's just the same the whole way through, eh?
Oh no, I wouldn't say their chemistry is like. I do. Like I said, there's no there. Oh, well, actually, I will point out in a few moments like where I think the Swedish version is like clearly better. Okay. But most of it is either the same or like just like on a very similar level. Sure. So I wouldn't say they have the same chemistry just because, like I said, I think the Daniel Craig and Nyquist versions are slightly different, and I definitely think the Rooney Mara and Mara Pace versions are different. So the chemistry obviously can't be the same. But I do think both versions work in concert. I think their chemistries are equal. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, because it's different energies from both pairs, right? So like what you just said about how this version of Lisbeth, you believe she would fall for Nyquist because of how hunky he is, but also sensitive. I think it also works that as long as you have a good actor playing this role, I think that idea will come across that Lisbeth, who is a very wounded character and who has a very hard time with men because men have taken advantage of her and victimized her entire life. As long as you have an actor who can play Blomkvist as this guy who is like got a good heart and she can sense that, and he's like clearly like protective of her and he's sweeter to her, despite like the fact that when he first meets her, he has his guard up because he finds out she's been investigating him, and like there's this element like that will always, as that comes across, and it works both times because both these actors can play that like, oh, this is a good guy, right? I get why Lisbeth would like him, and I get why Lisbeth would suddenly sleep with him, which is a total surprise to him in both versions, right? It comes out of nowhere. And I think that works in both versions. Cool.
I love the moment in this one, and watch, you're going to tell me that it happened the exact same fucking way in the other one, but there's
most of it does, so go for it. But
I loved this moment in here that it was like pure visual storytelling that's like displaying character, and the way that there's no score and just overwhelming sound of the subway is when Lisbeth gets her bag stolen with her laptop and she runs after the guy on the escalator and like fights him off. It's fucking screams in his face, gets away, and there's no score. It's totally played like very cacophonous, like in the sound design, and it just like I thought that was just fantastic. Now, what are you gonna say to that?
You don't want me to say it's basically the same, but if my memory is correct, there's no score in the Swedish one either. Really? I will say the difference in the Swedish version is she is attacked by like 4 guys, and the fight doesn't like continue onto the subway. It's like it's in a subway tunnel, but yeah, it's like a very vicious attack where like 4 guys beat her up, and she breaks like a bottle and screams at them to like chase them off. But same thing, like it breaks her laptop. It's like I said, it's like. I can't help it, right? It's
no, you can't help it. And
they're both making the book,
So my question earlier when I was like, "What's the better adaptation?" Your answer is almost like equal at this point because that's what they're doing.
This is where I don't know if I'm going to sway you at all to like bump this up on your queue. What I will say about the Swedish one is, now you mentioned, and I agree, the American version has an issue where the mystery we care about, the Harriet Wenger mystery, wraps up, and the American version goes on for like 20 more minutes.
Yeah.
The Swedish version ain't
Ends?
fucking around with that. The Swedish version has a lot of the same stuff that's in that 20 minutes, but they condense it way more. I actually meant to go back and rewatch them both again, just the end, to like time it, but I didn't. But I would say what seems like about 15 minutes or so in the American version, I swear in the Swedish version is like 3 minutes. Like they get to like that ending very, very fast. They condense all that. So like once the Harriet mystery is done, we get to the point much, much faster, and there's less of the whole thing with like the burgeoning relationship between Lisbeth and Michael, where she's like starting to like feel like maybe she could be in a relationship with this guy and everything. That's left out of the Swedish version. And in fact, the last scene of the American version with her going to bring him a gift, which if I remember correctly, a change they made here, the gift she brings him is a motorcycle jacket. I swear to God, if my memory serves, that it's like a velvet Elvis painting in the original novel. Because he's like an Elvis fan. But that scene is dead on. That's how the book ends. But they left it out of the American or out of the Swedish version. They don't play the whole thing where she thinks she's going to be with Mikael, and then she comes back and sees him with Erica and like speeds off like mad. They leave that out, and it lives on more of a sense of where she just goes and she does what she does to Wernerstrom. He sees on the news like a report about her doing that, and he like laughs and smiles when he recognizes her, and then we see her in the wig like in the tropics with the money, and that's how the Swedish one ends. Which is interesting that they like changed that ending, but it wraps up the movie faster. You know?
That's my biggest problem. Like again, coming back to like this one, the 2011 one, is like, to me, I felt like I was so enthralled and I was so emotionally like just gratified by the end, and the reunion scene. I'm trying not to spoil things, but also like we said, how big these books are and the movies are. But basically, when they solve it, I did like tear up. I'm like, I was felt with such catharsis of like, they did it, and there's something happy here with this extremely dark and sinister film, that there's some glimmer of hope and happiness and love. Which I just, I am, maybe I'm just getting old and sappy, but I do like that kind of shit every once in a while. And then the movie just keeps going. And that's what has always killed me about this movie, is that last 20 minutes. And I remember seeing this with my friend in theaters the first time. And afterwards, we're like, we loved it, but what the fuck? What? We're like, why did they do that? Because listeners, it's so rushed. It's so quick, and it's about something I don't care about. Obviously the movie is the second part of the deal with Mikael is that he's going to have some evidence to clear his name. Okay, fair enough. So you kind of want him to be cleared, but the emotional crux of the story is the mystery, is the murder mystery, and uncovering that truth. In my opinion, we could have waited till book 2, movie 2 to get all that done, but they wrap it up in such quick succession that it doesn't hit. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. It's like I'm sure you watched this with Liz.
Mm-hmm.
Did Liz, your wife, did Liz, like, how did she feel about that end? I'm very curious.
I didn't really ask her how she felt about the ending in particular. I think I did mention while we were watching it that I think I made a comment about like,
it's not over yet.
Could this wrap up? Like, and it's just like, so now I'm kind of flashing back because like it is interesting. So I will say this, because I've been saying like, well, both versions just made the book and that's why they're so close. Mm-hmm. They both make changes. And it's interesting to see which changes each of them makes, So I'll tell you, like, one thing that the Swedish version entirely leaves out, which is interesting because they don't leave it out of the sequels, but it's not in the first film, is the relationship between Mikael and Erica, his co-publisher at the magazine. Yeah. That's not in the Swedish version. So it almost seems like he's like, so in the Swedish version, you're almost like totally more like, well, there's like no obstacle to him and Lisbeth potentially being together, right? Because he does not have this other relationship. You only learn that he does in the sequels, which also, and that's why they don't have that last scene probably, because they haven't established the relationship with Erica.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But what they leave out, but what's in that Swedish version that I think is so fascinating that they left out of the American one, is that as we see at the beginning of the movie, the story, he has been found guilty for libel against Wernerstrom, right? Yeah. He has been, in the Swedish version and in the book, he has been sentenced to a jail term he has to go to jail for 3 months for that, or 6 months, something like that. But as is often the case in those kind of crimes, he doesn't have to report to jail immediately. So like when the Vanger Industries reach out to him, they say like, look, we know you have to go to jail soon. Before you go to jail, we want you to help us solve this mystery. And so you love a ticking clock. There's this whole ticking clock in that story where it's like he has to do this before his jail term is supposed to start because he has to report to it. And in fact, in the Swedish version, this is what's fascinating is, as I just said, they condense all that into like a shorter span of time. But in that span of time, you actually see that after the mystery is solved, he does go to jail. And there's a scene where we see him in jail, and Lisbeth comes to visit him there. And while he's in jail, she brings him the evidence she's uncovered, which helps him now actually nail Wernerstrom when he gets out. And then she goes and does the whole like getting the wig and like emptying all the accounts and stuff while he's in jail, right? So I just thought it was interesting that they left that out because it's like kind of a compelling idea that our hero can't beat that, right? He still has to serve the time, and I just thought I don't know why they didn't do that in the American version.
I mean, the American version is 2.5 hours.
They both are. They're both 2.5 hours. Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
Okay,
I'll give you one more thing that I think is better done in the Swedish one too. This one's actually important to our purposes.
Can I say that the better thing in the American one has got to be the score, right?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Okay, because I just want to say that right now is that this score, so The Social Network is my favorite score of them, of Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor with a Fincher film. Yeah, okay. Social Network was on repeat for like 5 years, and like certain tracks I would go to all the time. This one a close second. I
really
think
you like this one more than Gone Girl.
Though I think very similar in their atmospheric feelings. I would bet that they had some cross-pollination.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like I think both scores are very atmospheric and very they're kind of like the beating heart of both those films. So
yeah.
The Social Network is more about tracks. You know what I mean? Like the score sounds like, I don't want to say songs, but you can like listen to them one to one. But if I'm listening to this score, I would go right from like, you know, top to bottom in the album. But I do love this score quite a bit. It's very propulsive, and it's very, again, the beating heart is what I kept writing down in my notes. But just want to
you know Nine Inch Nails is one of my favorite artists of all time. So
you were lucky enough to see them recently.
I did,
and to hear your favorite song from your favorite movie, Tron Ares.
coming someday on Failure Franchise. We'll talk about it, but and you and I will definitely have a discussion about that movie, but we'll save that. Not surprisingly, not to shock you, but the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score is in this movie is better than the Swedish one, which has a very a basic score.
Totally.
But for our purposes, because a lot of our talk is about, does the movie end with you wanting to see a sequel, right? Wanting to follow it up, and again, so. Both filmmakers had the advantage of making a movie at a period where the entire trilogy had already been like written and published, right? So they knew what elements to seed for like the next films.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of surprised at how the American version, I think, does a worse version of it, because the scene, okay, we're getting heavy into spoiler territory here now. So sorry, folks, but go watch the movie if you don't want the next few.
Hey, like I said, it's not about the reveal. I think these movies are about the journey.
And you know what proves you're right is that we are talking about movies, and we always want movies to have rewatchability factor. And the mystery can only be the mystery the first time you watch it. So like it has to be the fact that, can you watch this movie even when you know who the bad guy is and still enjoy it? And that comes down to the characters and how they solve the mystery.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, at this point, he's coming off of what I think is his masterpiece, Zodiac. He'd done that like a while back, right? A movie that has no solution to its mystery.
Exactly.
And that's the point, right? And like, so yeah, that doesn't matter. You're right. But I won't even get into character names or anything, but the moment where Lisbeth ostensibly dispatches of the villain in both versions, I think is handled better in the Swedish version, because throughout the Swedish version, they keep having we see her fall asleep and have these nightmares. And the nightmares show a young Lisbeth throwing gasoline onto a man in a car and setting him on fire. And you probably already know that the name of the next book and movie is The Girl Who Played with Fire. So you see this and you think like, oh, that's clearly young Lisbeth. Who is this man she's setting on fire? What is going on? And we keep seeing these flashbacks. And then in the Swedish version, when she dispatches the villain, he's in a car. He ends up in a car accident as she's chasing him, and he is stuck in the car and he's on fire. And she goes up and he's like begging for help. He's like begging her to pull him out. And we see her have that flashback again to a young Lisbeth setting this man on fire and watching him burn. And she does not pull him out. She just lets him burn to death. And then when she tells Mikael about that later, and he's like kind of shocked by this. He's kind of flabbergasted that she didn't help him. And even though he had just tortured him, he's like kind of like, I can't believe. And then, but he does say to her, like, I don't know what happened to you to make you like where you would let that happen, but just know I'll always like support you, but he's still kind of taken back by it. The American version, oddly enough, never does the flashbacks to young Lisbeth setting a man on fire, which is very, very important for the next two movies or next two stories, because we learn what her backstory is and how that ties into what's going on. And instead she just tells him after the fact that she like set her dad on fire, right? It's all done like spoken word.
Yeah.
And I think by having the moment in the American version where she's walking up to the car and it just suddenly explodes, like instantly killing the bad guy, to me that felt like so less like haunting and effective as watching her watch him burn and not save him in the Swedish one. So that was like to me that was like a rare like misstep from Fincher, where it's like, ooh, he did that in a way that doesn't set up the next movies as much. Like I just thought that was kind of like disappointing to me.
It's interesting that you have chosen this opinion here because of you saying that Rooney Mara's version of Lisbeth is more alien.
Yeah.
And then in this, I feel like this one, like when she looks at Mikael on the ground and she's like, may I kill him?
I do love that. That's great.
The best.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then she runs off and it's like the editing of her on the bike and like cocking the gun and going up to him. And then it explodes. It just felt like, yes, she's ruthless, but and technically she does cause the accident, right? Mm-hmm. She still does get him. And then in the scene later when she's like laying with Mikael as he's like coming out of like being, injured, and she rolls over and asks about her, and then he's oh, maybe I don't need to ask you these questions. And then she does say, yeah, like I burned my father alive or whatever she says.
Yeah.
It's played for like that Fincher-esque sense of humor, that dark, sinister like wit that I felt was more in line with this version of Lisbeth for me, versus watching somebody. Well, I guess the guy is like really, really bad. So I'm like, that's an interesting one. That's an interesting one. I'm curious. I'm really curious now.
Yeah.
How that plays.
Well, and like I said,
because I don't really need to be spoon fed either, because that feels like the Swedish one is spoon feeding you a little bit.
It's not spoon feeding. I think, like I said, I think what they were doing is like, again, they had the benefit of, they knew they were making all three, right? They went into this with like, we're making all three. So they knew we need to film these scenes anyways, these flashback scenes of young Lisbeth doing this, because it's going to be seeded into the next movies, because the next movies are very much about her backstory. Like that's, and I will, in a moment we'll talk about that when we talk about
it's like Lord of the Rings. Like one of the first scenes that they filmed was Sam Astin at the fires of Mount Doom.
Sean Astin, but
what'd I say?
Sam Astin. Wow, your Lord of the Rings card revoked. You want to be fair, he does play Sam. You were just
that's why I said you son of a bitch. Frodo Astin. Anyway.
Yes. Sam Astin and Frodo Wood, as we all know. No, and I get it. It's probably all just personal opinion, like for me, like the watching him, like there's like getting to watch Lisbeth watch him burn is like more like compelling to me than just the car exploding from in a distance,
it's just so fascinating that these two movies are both like so critically acclaimed and so beloved and came out within 2 years,
and they'll always exist in conversation with each other too. Totally. Right? That's what's kind of fascinating about them. And like nobody, and I don't think anyone is like one rules and one sucks. You never hear that opinion, right?
That's what I was about to say. Was like there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
So like even this one, like the conversation we're having here, it's more curiosity. It's more a dialogue than you're wrong, I'm right, or this is better and this is worse. It's very much like you said, a conversation.
It kind of displays to your point about how this was like kind of not rushed, but like they wanted to get this out, right? They wanted to strike while the iron is hot. And we know, as you said, Fincher is a crazy perfectionist. He's someone who like wants to spend forever in a movie. And I think on this, I don't want to say he half-assed this movie. He would never do that. But I do wonder if this was more of a commercial job to him than a lot of his other filmography. I wonder if he even had the sense of like, well, they're bringing this to me because I'm the serial killer guy. I get it, right? And like he didn't feel like that that indebted to like go overboard with like making anything wildly his own. And that's why he just kind of made the book, and he made a movie very similar to the one he admits he had just watched. And like, I almost wish he had taken bigger like creative leaps and they had changed a lot more stuff in this just to make it like more, like we've talked in recent episodes about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. There is a book that book defines his life, right? There's nothing more important to Guillermo del Toro than the novel Frankenstein. Yeah. And yet when he made Frankenstein, he was willing to take wild leaps with the story and like not make the novel, and like I wonder what it would have been like if they had let Zalian and Fincher go a little wild on this and say like, you don't have to feel so indebted to the book, do your own thing. And I will say my one bit of evidence that maybe Fincher cared less about this movie than he often does, and again, I don't mean that in any mean way, but there's a moment in this movie where Daniel Craig opens a refrigerator with a water bottle on top, and the water bottle slips and falls, and he quickly catches it. That is something that was not supposed to happen, and Daniel Craig just actually did that, and David Fincher was like, you know what, I like that, I'll leave that in the movie. That is the most un-David Fincher thing I've ever heard in my life. The fact that he's like, yeah, okay, I'll leave that in. Like, that's like, wow. He was like, yeah, whatever. I want to wrap this one up.
That's called growth, Trev. Called growth. Yeah,
he's like, he's like, oh, that was great, Daniel. Can you try to do that 206 more times?
That may have been the 206th time, by the way. And then he was like, fuck it, whatever. Yeah. I also found...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
Should we talk about the amazing Joel Kinnaman and his great performance in this?
Actually, funnily enough, that's actually going to lead into kind of what I'm saying right now.
Oh, okay.
That Joel Kinnaman has a jump scare in this movie. He doesn't say a word, but this movie is the precursor to David Fincher's Netflix career. And I say this because, yes, he's the crime thriller guy, but not on TV yet. And there's something to be said that this is kind of gets his, TV cop drama procedural feet wet with this one. Famously, they had said that this movie isn't a 3-act structure. It's more built on a 5-act structure because it is similar to TV. And he goes on to being in bed now, currently still, and continuing
apparently
on
forever.
With Netflix. And he creates or helps to develop House of Cards. Robin Wright joins the cast, who is in this film as Erica Berger, and Joel Kinnaman does appear in that show in a few seasons later as well. So this is the starts of Fincher's procedural TV career, I would say. And there's a lot of there's just a lot of connective tissue. And I didn't watch Mindhunter. I know a lot of people did, and some of my friends love it. But I know it didn't end, so I didn't go to it because
but both seasons tell a complete story on their own. Right. So that I will say that. Yeah.
I did keep up with House of Cards. I'll say that. And it crashed and burned. So
yeah. Well, you say I remember you telling me that you're like, once they got rid of my favorite actor Kevin Spacey, I just didn't care anymore.
I will say, the show took a major nosedive when he wasn't on the show. Okay, I'm not afraid to say the obvious that the show sucked without him. But
then to continue, you were like, I just can't understand why they got rid of him. Like, it just seems like the man did nothing wrong.
He's one of our greatest living actors.
Certainly one of our greatest entertainers. Go watch footage of the live shows he's doing recently.
Yes, and just go check out him on YouTube with his Christmas greetings. I don't think he does it anymore. Those were some of my favorites.
We should just quickly say though, the Joel Kinnaman element, the Joel Kinnaman jump scare, is the most clear acknowledgement to the fact that they did make this thinking they were going to make the whole trilogy. Because Joel Kinnaman agreed to this entirely wordless role because that's a character who plays a slightly larger role in the next couple movies.
Correct. So, Correct. It is interesting, though, that you kind of just said it, but Fincher is seemingly in the Netflix camp forever. This is where he wants to be, so which is fine. I mean, whatever. I mean, they're paying his bills, but it sucks that his movies aren't going to come on Blu-ray ever again. It seems that way, but
you know what I will say though too, and look, I love Gone Girl. I mean, to me, Gone Girl is.
I hate Mank.
I've never seen Mank, but let me make this. But let me make this point.
Make sure you have fucking 5 coffees before watching Mank.
Let me make this point because I love Gone Girl. I think Gone Girl is, and like I said, I like this movie, but I think Gone Girl is way better than this movie.
Gone Girl is no notes perfection.
Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo goes right into Gone Girl, so it's like 2 movies in a row. He was brought like what's the hot like mystery like grocery store novel right now, right? And in both cases, I think he's probably satisfied with what he created. In both cases were critically acclaimed. Both cases especially brought a lot of critical acclaim to their female leads, and there's no shame in either of his movies. But I do wonder if he, like I said, I wonder if he got a sense of like, boy, they see me as like the crime creepy guy, so they're just going to keep bringing me these novels, you know? And I wonder if he felt like trapped and saying like, for theatrical studio stuff, I'm just getting pigeonholed into like the guy who like adapts the creepy serial killer books of the time, and he's like, I gotta fucking go to Netflix where they'll let me make Mank, a movie nobody gives a shit about, you know? Like I wonder if that's part of it, like, and like, but that's not to dismiss either of those movies, but I could see someone like David Fincher being like, I don't want to just keep making these adaptations, you know? And I almost wonder if a part of him kind of feels freed by the fact that he didn't have to make the sequels to this. I don't know. Well, it's hard to say.
Well, less people to answer to. I mean, Netflix has unlimited money, right? They will seemingly make anything, you know? And David Fincher is one of our greats. You know, he's not just some director. He is a visionary, right? And I think also it helps that he jumped on the digital way of doing things early on. I think his stuff translates well to home theatrical experiences. In a lot of ways. So like I thought The Killer was pretty damn good, and it looked great. But I think
hey, right now he's making my most anticipated movie of the year, which is the Adventures of Cliff Booth. So I have not like by no means have I like abandoned David Fincher.
Oh no,
but
no.
I am bummed that David Fincher has abandoned theatrical. Or that's a bummer, just because I want his releases to be like a bigger deal like they used to be. So
abandoned or just succumb to the truth.
Succumb to like by truth you just mean like the reality of like
the reality. So I guess the reality of the beast. You know, like he can be Christopher Nolan all day long saying theatrical, film. And, you know, students can't even sit through movies anymore.
But let me ask you, though, do you think that to play devil's advocate on that, is he denying himself a potential Oppenheimer by not doing, you know what I mean? Like, could David Fincher have something as big as that? Or, you know, at least like, you know, he's been in Oscar contention before. Is he denying himself that by sticking to where he is?
Do you think a David Fincher cares?
Probably, I guess not. It doesn't seem like he does at this point. So.
I don't think he cares about that shit at all.
Yeah.
Look, today it was announced that Christopher Nolan is the DGA president. You know, does Fincher want to be the fucking DGA president? You know what I mean? Like I think they are going for two different.
Do you think he
things.
stopped caring about the Oscars after they were like if they gave King's Speech Best Picture over Social Network? He's like, fuck you. I'm probably like that. He's like, burn it all down at that point. You know?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so this movie though, I definitely would have liked to see these sequels. I mean, it sucks, but you know.
Now here's where I...
You're like, they're Swedish, and you can watch them right now.
No, now listen, here's where I come around and say, I wanted to too, because here's the thing. I love the Swedish Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I prefer it to this one, as I said, for you know, multiple reasons.
Yeah.
And this is, again, probably more of a matter of like subject matter than anything else, or like source material. The next two movies just aren't quite as good. And it also should be said, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you have to wrestle with the fact that the next two movies were made for TV originally, you know, and then refashioned into theatrical. Now, to be fair, it's still Swedish TV, still plenty of nudity and graphic violence, right? Like much more so than you would expect when you hear they're made for TV. You know, sex scenes, graphic, bloody violence, still all there, but they're a different director. A different director makes the next two. And they feel slightly cheaper, and they feel a little bit more rushed. They're different writers too, I think. And it's just also true that, and this is where you have to remember that Stieg Larsson died, and this is like intended to be a 10-book series. So he didn't think stories 2 and 3 were going to be the end. So you watch them, you go, well, okay, these two stories give us all the information about Lisbeth. They fill in her backstory. They bring all that to like a close. They complete the arc, but it's not the most exciting it's just not the most exciting conclusion. I'll just say right now, like the third one, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, is for the most part like just an entire like investigation courtroom story, and it's like that's not what you want for a trilogy capper. And then you have to remember, like, well, he wasn't seeing it as a trilogy capper; he was seeing it as like part 3 of a longer saga, you know. Right. So it does wrap up like the storylines for that. And I will say, and this is you're gonna hate hearing this, but it's just something you have to wrestle with if you're gonna watch the whole trilogy. Blomkvist and Lisbeth are kept separated through most of the next 2 movies.
Oh,
like
really?
And then by design of the story, yeah, right. It's all about how like they're working on like different tracks. They're working on the same thing, but they are very rarely together. And that's kind of the point, because as I said, that scene you saw at the end of this movie is how the first book ends, where Lisbeth gets so mad that she cuts herself off from Blomkvist. And so you're waiting to see, like, you want them to have this reunion, right? You want them these 2 characters to finally come back together. And he's putting that off because he knows how satisfying it'll be when it finally happens. Mm-hmm. Which I get on a storytelling level, but that means then you watch these 2 other 2 hour and 10 minute movies where the 2 characters you just want to see hanging out and investigating together again are never on camera together, never on screen together. So here's where I say, this is where the one concession I'll make to this is that David Fincher and Steve Zaillian have said that the screenplay they were working on for Girl Who Played with Fire was very different from the book. Yeah. And I think they probably had heard the kind of feedback of everyone saying, like, man, we love that first movie. The next 2 movies, not as good. And I think they saw an opportunity to say, okay, we didn't change anything for the first book because everybody fucking loved that first book. No notes, you know, like everyone's just like, great story. Oh my God, I can't believe this murder mystery turns into this crazy Nazi, like, serial killer story. Holy shit, everything rules. Let's just do it. And then everyone's like, well, we like the next 2, but they kind of drag. These 2 characters aren't together. And this is where Zaillian and Fincher could have been like, we could actually rewrite these and put our own stamp on them. So that's like my bummer. Like, I'm happy that we have the entire trilogy filmed and that Noomi Rapace and Michael Nyqvist got to make their whole version. And if you need to complete the story, you get it all. But I actually wish Hollywood could have gone on and do 2 and 3 and made better versions of them. And I think they would. I will say, even though I think the Swedish version of this is better, I think there's almost no doubt in my mind that Fincher and Zaillian would have made a better Girl Who Played with Fire and Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. So I am bummed it didn't happen. Now, the question is, why do you think it didn't happen? What the fuck? Like, if we acknowledge that the box office was pretty good, I guess it's just that Sony has said it wasn't as good as they wanted, right? So what were they expecting from this? That's what for a movie this dark and this twisted, like, did they really think they were going to get up to like 600? Like, what were they thinking? I
remember that there was a big controversy of how much this movie cost.
Yeah.
And this was upwards of $100 million. And like David Fincher was not going to budge on that. Mm-hmm. And I have a sneaking suspicion that was the problem going into the second one.
And I will say again,
he probably was like, now I need 120 million. And they're like,
yeah,
oh my
and
God.
to Sony's, and I will say again, to Sony's credit, 150 million. I know the Swedish version was not the hat, and again, they're pretty much the same movie. So you do wonder, like, why does the Hollywood version that goes into Hollywood accounting, right? Like, where is this money going?
Yeah.
You know.
So if I was to guess, it's that they could never settle on a number for what Fincher required to make the film. So that's my guess. But
do you think if Rooney Mara had won the Oscar, they would have felt more indebted to make the sequels, or no?
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Me too.
I think so. Because she was nominated, and she had a pretty good chance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who won that year, though. I didn't check.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Should we check live on the podcast?
Yeah, why not?
Let me check. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Pause for dramatic effect. Oh, Meryl Streep won.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so that was the reason.
For some bullshit, right? Was that the Iron Lady year?
That was the Iron Lady, which she did a funny voice. I know. Yeah.
Who were the other nominees?
Glenn
was there anyone
Close, Albert Nobbs. So goofy makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Viola Davis in The Help. I think she had.
Okay.
Did she have? Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the one where she had the one scene and she won for? Doubt.
Yeah.
Doubt. I remember that.
That was Meryl Streep. Yeah, right.
But wasn't Viola Davis in there?
Oh, is she? Okay.
I think she won. Doesn't matter.
Who was the other?
Michelle Williams. My Week with Marilyn. A biopic.
You know what? Rooney Mara should have won that year.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. But that's tough competition. Holy shit.
Even though I will say again, and one thing we didn't talk about this is too the thing where I said earlier about how like this was made for people who don't want to read subtitles and Hollywood feeling like they just need to make everything themselves.
Yeah.
I have read that Swedish people in particular thought that Rooney Mara's accent in this was actually pretty bad.
Oh, really?
Apparently she doesn't. Apparently to them she sounds more German than Swedish. And I do like that Daniel Craig is on record as saying he just thought it was silly to even try the Swedish accent, so he's like, I'm not going to do it. And he just uses regular accent. And you know what? I think he's right. And I know you and I have had this debate, this discussion before when they made it's like when they made Chernobyl and they said like don't do Russian accents. Like you as the audience is already accepting that when we're watching you, we understand you're speaking Russian, but we're hearing it as English, so we don't need accents. And I think that was probably true in this as well. Yeah.
They let Nui Rapace use her own voice in Prometheus, so her own accent, right?
Yep. And look what it got her. Really, she got to star in the whole Alien series after. Oh no, wait, never mind.
They dispatched of her pretty quick.
One of the main reasons I still can't get into Alien Covenant.
You know, it's funny. Not to go off in too much of a sidebar here because we are wrapping up. But when Covenant confirms that she's dead, was like did we learn nothing from the Newt thing?
I know.
The decades-long Newt controversy of killing a beloved character. Alas.
Oh, what director did that?
I know. God damn you, David.
Although I have no problem with him killing Newt personally.
Yeah.
But I hear you saying I know the audience.
Yeah. I also Defender of Alien 3. Okay.
Oh yeah. I love Alien 3.
Yeah,
You know what? You and I love Alien 3 way more than David Fincher does.
Oh
so.
yes.
Yeah.
Alien 3 was my first Alien movie, by the way.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you really couldn't care less about Newt.
No, I couldn't care. I didn't even know who the fuck that was. I had no idea. Okay. I'll make you a promise, Trev, right now, because we've wrapped up Dragon Tattoo and we're moving on to The Girl in the Spider's Web from 2018 as the next episode. And that's what, the beginning of the second trilogy of the books?
Is. So because the intention was to make the American versions of the next two Larsson books, and they worked on it for a while. And obviously we'll tell the story in more detail in the next episode. But when they decided that they were not going forward with that, it made the most sense to them, I guess, to just say, well, if we're going to start a reboot, let's just go to the beginning of the next trilogy, the David Lagercrantz trilogy. And I'll have a lot of thoughts to say about that whole thing next time. But, yeah.
But I'll make you a promise, okay? Because we're going to discuss that movie. I will watch the Swedish Dragon Tattoo movie before.
Okay. Well, you know what? I would almost say you don't have to, and like you could definitely, because you're going to fall into the same problem I did, just in reverse, right? Like you might want to wait a while before you watch it. But
wait, hold on though, because I'm going to watch the original 09 version.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to watch the whole trilogy?
No. I'm just going to watch that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but aren't you worried that you're going to have the same issue I did, just in reverse, where you're just going to watch it and be like, well, I don't know, it's just the same movie I just watched?
I've gone cross-eyed. Maybe you're right. Maybe my promise is revoked. Maybe I'll wait.
Yeah.
I'll wait a couple weeks.
What I thought you were going to say, which makes sense to me, is like I thought you were going to like really commit and say you're going to watch the whole trilogy, because that would make sense to watch 2 and 3, because you'd be filling in the story gap between this one and the next one.
Yeah. I can't make that promise.
Yeah, maybe you should just go read some summaries of it.
Or
Can you even make that promise? Can you read the Wikipedia summaries of Girl Who Played with Fire and Girl Kicked the Hornet's Nest?
I'm in my non-committal era right now. Okay. Okay. Next episode. The Girl in the Spider's Web.
You know what? Actually, sorry, I take it back. You know what? Go watch the original, if only because then we can have a conversation about the 3 Lisbeths next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then, so now you're forcing me.
Not forcing you. I just think it'd be interesting if like we can actually talk about the 3 actresses who have
your hand is slowly coming around to the back of my head. And okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I will. Okay, back to the original commitment. I will watch the 09 Girl with the Dragon.
Because then we can talk for Lisbeth and Blomkvist. We can talk about all 3 portrayals. Like,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. Okay. Follow along at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2FPod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be awesome. And then just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And let's continue on with the girl with the failed February franchises.
Hey, are you a big fan of that movie convention where every time main characters go into like any like restaurant or store, there's always a TV just blaring the news, and of course the news is talking only about the things that are affecting the main characters?
I like that.
Okay, good, because we certainly got a lot of it in this. So. mean, right now, Rooney Mara and Kate Mara are making a Werner Herzog movie called Bucking Fastard. So everything about that sounds great.
What's the plot? Jean and Joan Holbrook are two sisters who are so close they speak in unison, love the same man, and have the same dreams. In search of an imaginary land where true love is possible, they start digging through an entire mountain range. What?
Yep, that sounds like a Herzog movie.